Hey, good morning, Poet Nutrition team. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. I just think a week from today, it's the unofficial beginning of summer. I love summer. It's my favorite season. Can't wait. And then also next week, we're going to start our move-in process back to Poet Nutrition. So really looking forward to that as well, and get a chance to see a number of you face to face. Missed you guys. Well, just want to continue this conversation on the ideal team player. As Patrick Lencioni describes in his book, the ideal team player is someone who is humble, hungry, and smart. And humility is the most important of those three characteristics, yet it's the hardest to identify. Now, the concept of humility, I think most time we need to be focused more on our own humility than worrying about other people's humility. But sometimes it's necessary for us to try to identify humility in someone else. After all, if we want to build a team full of ideal team players at Poet Nutrition so we can create as much synergy as possible, we do need to identify or try to identify whether people are humble or not, especially during this interview process where we maybe only have 30 or 60 minutes to determine that. And I think it's really challenging. And I think anybody that thinks that they've got to figure it out, they don't, and they're probably not a very good example of humility themselves, right? It's really difficult. And in his book and online, Patrick Lencioni has a number of interview questions that he recommends using, and those are great. I'm also going to attach a link to a Forbes article about identifying humility in people and some characteristics to look for. But I thought I may just share with you a couple things I try to implement in my interviews to try to determine if someone is humble or not. And I'll be the first to say I know I don't have it down, but I really start with one thing, is trying to learn as much as I can about how someone grew up, about their formative years. Again, as we talked last week, we're all born very selfish, right? As babies, the world does revolve around us. And so humility is really a learned thing over time. And the time we're going to learn it the most is in our formative years. So I really try to understand about people, like when their first job was, and how long did they have these jobs, and what types of jobs were they? Because I think that's a great time for anyone to learn humility when they're young, or they're a teenager and they're working as a server in a restaurant or at a grocery store doing manual labor for someone. I think that's a time that really builds humility. Those work experiences as a youth, I think, are just so important and so underestimated. Not only is that a time when someone develops work ethic and responsibility, but I think it also develops that humility when you're serving somebody else. So that's something I really try to understand as best as I can. And then another thing, I just really want to see how open and honest people are in talking about their failures and disappointments and weaknesses in their life. Also want to see how they talk about their achievements and successes. But with their failures and their weaknesses, I want to try to understand how open and honest people are in talking about them and how real they are. You know, some people in an interview will say, well, their greatest weaknesses, they get too passionate about their job, or they're they like to volunteer too much, where they really try to make their weaknesses a strength. I look for people that can really honestly share a weakness or a failure or a disappointment in their life. I think that's a true sign of humility. It's not a weakness to talk about your weakness, because we all have them, right? And also look for people how they talk about their success and achievements. Mainly, are they using the word I a lot or we a lot? And so those are some of the things I look at, and I think it can maybe give us an indication. It's not a perfect science, but I just thought I would share that with you today, because again, I think we need to focus on ourselves, but on occasion, we need to try to identify that in others. So thanks for listening today. Have a great rest of the day. We'll be in touch. Bye now.